Hello, this is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com talking with you about Mandela effects and false memories. This is a topic that I'm mentioning today because it's come into more and more association between these two things over the last year or so. Mandela effects, of course, being the term that was coined by Fiona Broome, and she's a blogger who posted back in 2010 just a post that it was surprising to not just herself, but a lot of people, that Nelson Mandela was alive in 2010 because they remembered that he had passed away earlier. Currently, I believe Nelson Mandela has passed away in 2013, but a lot of people, when questioned about it, do remember that he had died quite a bit earlier than that. I'm one of those people that also remember that he'd never gotten a chance to experience freedom outside of incarceration because he died while still in jail. Now, the interesting thing about this is, and what I want to talk about today, is the other idea that I'll be presenting is false memory, which specifically is a explanation, which is, I guess, something that happens oftentimes with individuals when they're hypnotized and they remember something that actually didn't happen. They don't even have to be hypnotized. Actually, apparently it's possible to trick people through associations that we have in our memories between certain things, that something happened that didn't actually happen. So that's the premise of the false memory. And the theory, as I understand it, being applied to groups of people who collectively recall something that's actually different in their memory from what historically occurred that the records show. So it's a difference between what you expect, what you remember, and then what's actual. So in classical terms of problem solving, this is the definition of a problem, because anybody who's using mental processes to make a decision, analyze a situation, and look at a problem, will notice that there's definitely a distinction here between what happened and what you think should have happened. So in a Mandela effect, where lots and lots of people are noticing these things, and I've done a graph before, and this is from my blog, Mandela effects affect a lot of people. It happens usually unexpectedly, so it's the subconscious that seems to be driving the process. I've used the term reality shifts since the 1990s to describe the same thing. And it also can involve anywhere from one person to, again, a huge group of people, as opposed to something that you do through what people might call law of attraction, what I would call quantum jumps, where it's something typically more conscious that you're bringing into being through the idea that your consciousness has something to do with reality. A very shamanic concept, goes way back thousands of years, and it has backup right now in quantum physics. So getting back to the Mandela effect and this idea of false memories, the other thing that I want to bring up as an example that is relevant in this case is that with the Mandela effect, people that lived in South Africa almost always remember the first time they heard that Nelson Mandela died was 2013, 4 years ago. And that would contrast to people who would be experiencing the so-called Mandela effect, or what I call a reality shift. Okay, so that's one example having to do with geographic location. There's another example which has to do with physiological changes in the body. And in this case, I'll talk about the kidneys. A lot of us who remember that something called a kidney punch used to be avoided in martial arts, which I've been practicing for 20 years. You avoid hitting someone in what used to be the kidney area. And as I'm talking about it, you'll be hopefully remembering where that is. And what I'm talking about is people remember the kidneys being in the lower back. So if you put your hands kind of to support yourself in your lower back, the way some people do when they're just feeling tired, that would be protecting your kidneys. That's no longer true. And if you now look to see where the kidneys are, here's a very teeny tiny picture, but it shows they've moved up several inches, so they're now much more out of harm's way. However, the term kidney punch is still used, and when I looked up references, it still describes the sort of thing that you want to avoid, which is if you strike someone in the kidneys, you can rupture the kidney, which can lead to blood in the urine, which is a very bad sign, and people can die. So now it's much less likely that will happen. Kidney punches, the term makes no sense anymore. You may wonder, who are the people that think that kidneys never moved? Well, it could be anyone, as usual, but specifically, medical professionals tend to think that nothing's changed and the kidneys have always been cuddled up right under the ribs. As that would be opposed to people like myself, who I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I am a martial artist, and so for me it's a bit strange to see this change. And so when I look at Mandela effect and false memories, what I would like you to consider is the possibility that instead of thinking that lots of people are just confused and they all just decided kidneys should move because it's safer, or who knows why. I don't know what the false memory theorists would say about this. But as far as reality shift perspective and the quantum physics perspective, which is the one that I write about in my books, this can be explained by just simply considering that macroscopic, in other words, large-scale quantum jumps actually do occur, and they've been occurring for thousands of years. So I'm saying this is part of the way nature works. It's the reason we live in such a remarkably unlikely universe. I mean, it's off the charts unlikely. It's the way photosynthesis works. It's the way nature works. Our bodies work that way, and we depend upon macroscopic quantum shifts for a large number of things all the time. So until next time, please keep asking my favorite question, how good can it get? And if you'd like to read more about this, I do write about it on my blog, so you can click the link and go there and check it out and read a lot more information and make up your own mind. Take care. This is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com.